Governor Tony Evers joins us now. Governor, thank you for your time. Welcome back to Upfront.
Thanks, Matt.
Want to begin with the latest on the GOP election investigation. About a dozen subpoenas served now so far to election officials and mayors in the state's five largest cities. Curious from your perspective, should they show up for these interviews and produce the documents that Michael Gableman is demanding?
Well, it seems, just what I've seen so far, Matt, it seems pretty broad base and kind of haphazard. But that said, I'm not an attorney. I would, as I said many times, these folks should lawyer up and be ready, because you really just don't know what's going to be asked. And so they'll have to rely on their own attorneys for advice. But it is somewhat of a show, and whatever they can do to make sure that it happens. But the deal is, at the end of the day, everybody knows that this election was fair and there was no fraud. And so we need to move on. Unfortunately, this little circus is going to be a bit of a distraction, but we'll get through it.
One of the focuses, at least right now, seems to be the private grants that some cities used to help run the elections. Looking back, should those cities have accepted those private dollars?
Well, the problem I have right now is that he's picking on these 5 cities. What about the other 200 or 100 cities that receive the same money? And suddenly it's no problem for them. It's just these five largest cities in the state. So no, that's for those mayors to figure out. But at the end of the day, the weird thing about it is, why is it only them that he's concerned about? He should be concerned about all the mayors that took that money.
Governor, your race, along with the race for Michigan governor and Pennsylvania governor, were featured in the New York Times this past week. Looking ahead to 2022 and 2024, you recently vetoed a number of GOP election bills. What do you see as your role as a Democratic governor when you look ahead to 22 and 24?
Well, certainly I have to play goalie against bad legislation. And for me, it's always been about, if you're eligible to vote, we should be trying to make sure that you have that opportunity. We shouldn't continue to put rules in place that is going to have the opposite effect. I don't think that's a good strategy for either party, frankly. But at the end of the day, if it looks like I'm going to be having legislation to make it more difficult to vote, I'll be vetoing those pieces of legislation, and the legislature knows that too. So I'm not quite sure the need for what we're going through now, but clearly when Robin Vos visited with the president, the tenor of this changed significantly, and unfortunately, the people of Wisconsin have to put up with it for a while.
Are you going to make this a big campaign issue?
Well, I don't think you have to. I mean, who in their right mind would think it's a good idea to make it more difficult for somebody in a nursing home to make it more difficult for them to vote, or people with physical disabilities? So I don't think, it's right there for people to see. And I have no doubt that it'll play a role, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, that's for sure, because it's ridiculous to begin with, and I don't know how many times I can say it.
Governor, the state and the nation, as you know, still dealing with the pandemic. Today, Pfizer is going to ask the FDA to authorize emergency use for kids between 5 and 12, emergency authorization. Curious, when the vaccine is approved, like we saw in California this past week, will you attempt, or would you consider a mandate for public school children?
Well, I think my hands are pretty well tied around that, because I need to have the Supreme Court and the Republicans took that away from my ability to do that. Will I encourage people to it? Absolutely. We have lots of people in the state that are waiting for that to happen, and so that all kids in our schools have that opportunity to be safe. And it's just part of our effort right now. Clearly, mandates aren't in the cards because of what the Supreme Court did. But a lot of help, we're getting a lot of help from local school districts, frankly, and also local public health officers. This can be solved easily, just people getting shots.
Are you going to encourage local school districts to impose mandates?
Well, they have to play that out in their own communities. Obviously, it's something that's highly contentious issues. I don't see it that way. I think wearing a mask, I've been in schools where it's been optional and everybody's wearing it and no one cares. So that kids don't care about this. This is an adult issue that frankly has gone off the rails across the country. And my goal is to continue to encourage people to stay safe, wear a mask when you're with other folks, and get a shot.
Looking ahead to 2022 and 2024, the fight over redistricting is heating up. We've seen court action in the past couple of days. It seems like Republicans now are poised to pass their maps sometime in November, making very little changes, it appears, to what's currently in place. Will you veto those maps?
Well, if they're continuing or making worse the gerrymandering that exists right now, yes. People should be able to count on their legislators to to listen to them and to make sure that everybody's vote counts. That's not what gerrymandering is about. So yes, I want fair maps. I don't want gerrymandered Democratic maps. I want fair maps, and that's what the people of Wisconsin deserve. And so if indeed what comes to my desk is gerrymandering 2.0, I'll veto it.
Is there any scenario in your mind as we sit here today that any type of deal can be reached between you and the legislature?
Well, you never say never, but hearing what you just talked about, I can't imagine that will happen. But if there's some magic that will happen between now and when it gets to my desk, of course I'll consider it. But the expectations aren't real high about that.
This would then go to the courts to decide, and what would be taken into factor is your commission's maps as well, the People's Map Commission that you orchestrated. They released their draft recently. One of the proposals and one of the impacts would reduce the number of state legislative districts with a majority of Black and Hispanic voters. Was that the intention, and do you have any concerns about those lines, especially when you look at the Voting Rights Act?
Yeah, well, the bottom line is, first of all, my involvement with this committee was to make sure it happened. Their deliberations have been out of my purview, but they know that their what they finally offer has to meet the Voting Rights Act, and so if there's any issues around that, they'll correct it between now and when they release the final maps. What they've done is good work, in that they've people are talking about it now, right? And instead of this kind of vague idea of what fair maps are, people now have a notion what it's like, and I anticipate that they'll come up with a final product that is compliant with the Voting Rights Act.
Will these maps be drawn, and will this be settled by the Wisconsin Supreme Court or in federal court?
Well, who knows? Right now, we have litigation in both venues. It could end up in both. The history on this in this state has been that a three-judge panel, which we now have in the federal court, will draw the maps. Of course, our Supreme Court seems to be interested in a role here. And just yesterday or the day before, the appellate judges or the federal judges talked about some timelines that are important to them, and so it's going to work out. If it goes to court, it's going to work out, and I feel confident that the people of Wisconsin will have fair maps.
Republicans have released some new legislation this past week. One of the proposals would eliminate the need for concealed carry licenses in Wisconsin. Would you veto that bill?
Well, I'd have to take a look at it. Obviously, as I recall, I think Scott Walker did not support that idea. I want to see how it plays out. I understand that that's what's headed my way, but I haven't seen it, and I haven't done anything other than read what they're doing in the newspapers. So I feel really important that I not talk about something I have not seen yet in any way or been briefed on. But I do recall that former Governor Walker vetoed that previously.
I want to talk to you about the DNR and the Natural Resources Board, and really what appears to be an unprecedented move this past week. The DNR went against the Natural Resources Board's recommendations for the wolf hunt, setting the quota at 130 as opposed to 300. Was this at your direction?
Well, we've had conversations. Certainly, I knew that the department was going to make that recommendation, and I support it. The last wolf hunt was a disaster. It went way over the limits. Frankly, people, in many cases, I would suggest that what was going on was anything but hunting, and so I think we really have to take a look at how this plays out long term. And in order for us to get to that long term point where we decide whether to have a hunt or not have a hunt, we need to keep the powder dry a little bit on this. And so I support what the department did, and it'll be obviously determined via some sort of court order someplace along the line. But we just have to realize that that last hunt was a disaster. It wasn't the department's fault. It was the fact that we were ordered by last minute by a circuit court in Jefferson County to do it, and so they did the best they could. It didn't work, and so we want to make sure it's safe and it's fair and it's actually hunting. And so having a lower number is really important.
It seems like a lot of the controversy and the friction on the Natural Resource Board currently goes to Frederick Prane, the Walker appointee, who has refused to step down to seat your appointee. Curious, are you planning any action? Do you have any action where you could force that transition?
Well, we're still in court on that with the Attorney General, and that initial decision is being appealed at that time. So at this point in time, the answer is no. We'll wait and see what happens with the judicial system. But at the end of the day, this should be about common sense. We shouldn't have to worry about someone not leaving when their term is over. That's just, no matter what's in the law, they're just things that make sense. I've been on the Board of Regents, and before people were approved by the Board of Regents. People were on the board making decisions. People whose terms ended, they understood what the end of a term means. It's not rocket science. It's a date, and so it can happen. In this case, it didn't, and I just hope that we can resolve this as soon as possible. It's embarrassing for everybody, and frankly, it's embarrassing for the state of Wisconsin.
I want to ask you, Governor, about the city of Milwaukee quickly. You and I were at an event together this past week in the city. A few minutes before you arrived, about a block away, someone fired multiple shots out of a moving vehicle and then sped away. The mayor has asked for more help. Community leaders have asked for more help. Curious, would you ever consider deploying the State Patrol or the National Guard to cities like Milwaukee to help address violence?
Well, I think before we even think about doing that, violence prevention isn't necessarily having a state patrol officer on every corner. Violence prevention, and you heard it from the community leaders yesterday in Milwaukee, talked about the importance of making sure that we're intervening early so that these things just kind of overrun. If the mayor and the county executive decided that they needed more help in certain areas, we'd consider it. But this isn't about establishing a police state in Milwaukee. This is about making sure that violence prevention works and that we have the resources necessary to stop it before it starts. But of course, what's happening is unacceptable. There's just no two ways about it. When we see a child killed in that fashion, it obviously breaks your heart. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure we react in a way that's actually evidence-based and that we can actually make a difference.
This will be an issue in the 2020 race for governor. This past week, State Senator Lena Taylor announced her candidacy for lieutenant governor. Do you want her as your lieutenant governor?
I'm just sitting back and waiting for the field to appear. I know Senator Taylor well. She's done a good job in the legislature over the years, but it'll be a big field, and I'm very happy that there's going to be a big field. That people in Wisconsin deserve to have some choices.
So you anticipate a primary for lieutenant governor?
Oh, for sure, for sure.
MPS recently said that they had asked you to activate the National Guard to address a crisis with school bus drivers. Curious if you took that under consideration, and what does that say to you as the former state superintendent about this crisis, just in terms of trying to get kids to school?
Yeah, that's a basic, right? If we're going to have school, we have to provide the resources, and that is busing to get them there. But yes, I was asked about that. We had a legislator ask the question to the folks at the commission that does that legislative bureau, and they said no, and their rationale was a good one. It's not allowed under law. So we responded back in that way. Disappointing, but that's we can't break the law even for a good cause. So yes, we need to continue to look at different options. I know the school board's working hard on that, but it's a basic. In order to have kids in school, you have to find a way to get them there, and hopefully we'll get that resolved soon. It is an issue. Clearly, as a country, as a state, we have shortages of workers all across the state, and this is just a good example of one. We have to make sure that we plan ahead in a more comprehensive way to make sure we get people in place.
And finally, before you go, Governor, we talked about your visit to Milwaukee this past week. You announced $75 billion in grant money for minority-owned businesses and underserved communities affected by the pandemic, all this part of the American Rescue Plan. Curious, as you look at these federal dollars, these grants, and the money overall, what is your measure for success in distributing this money?
Well, I can tell you, just using that as an example, our measure of success around, especially providing resources for small businesses across the state, Main Street businesses, is how many have we saved? How many are still in business? How many that were out of business came back into business? And there's some really easy markers for us to look at. I had a chance just this last week to visit some folks in the Fond du Lac area, that Main Street businesses that are back in the shop doing what they can, and so we'll be able to measure it not only in the numbers of people that we've helped, but frankly how that's impacting our bottom line as a state, our economy.
Governor Tony Evers, we tried to get a lot of issues in. We appreciate your time like always.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Governor.